I am Teen Miss New York Earth, Nicole Sandrik-Arzadi. I'm a first-year presidential academic scholar at the George Washington University, majoring in international affairs and minoring in Persian. Being selected as a member of my university's Women's Leadership Program, which includes alumni such as First Lady Jackie Kennedy, has helped me hone the skills necessary to rock both the Miss Earth stage and later a courtroom as I aspire to become a trial attorney. I graduated high school cum laude and as the recipient of the Citizen Scholar Award, the Louis B. Timberlake Publications Award, and as an advanced placement scholar with distinction. I've been pirouetting since age 6 and am classically trained in over 6 styles of dance, including ballet, jazz, and contemporary. Each summer, I utilize my dance background to teach adults with disabilities. Through singing and dancing classes, we create inclusive spaces where everyone can unlock their creative talents. As a child, I was extremely quiet and lacked the confidence to be my authentic self. I took a leap of faith 2 years ago to rebuild my self-confidence through modeling, and I've never looked back since. So far, I've been so blessed to work with brands such as Macy's and walk in shows such as New York Fashion Week. Teen Miss New York Earth, I've made it my mission to spread awareness of the harmful effects of food waste on both our earth and food insecure individuals. In an effort to make a tangible difference, I served as president of my local food bank's Teen Leadership Council. Under my leadership, we fundraised over $20,000. I've had the incredible opportunity to spread this message regarding food waste as a guest speaker in elementary schools, a Gen Z representative for the Little Words Project brand, and through my newest platform, the One Planet Project. As a pre-law student, I use my expertise and voice through weekly infographics on the One Planet Project page to encourage others to support pro-Earth candidates and policies. I joined the Miss Earth USA organization to gain a community of talented, empowered women, but also because this pageant aligns with my moral values. Social justice has always been at the forefront of my life, whether that means ad for women's rights or for the earth. Change-making is a huge part of who I am. I am so proud to represent an organization that believes in a greener world, and that means taking bold action each and every day.
Hello, everyone. It's Adrian from the Pageant Project. My special guest, as you saw, is Nicole Sandrik-Arzadi, who is Teen Miss New York Earth 2022. Nicole, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Now, Nicole was just telling me that she's just finished finals. So, how are you feeling? It was what, two or so weeks of solid study and exams and all that?
I remember during midterm season, my friend checked in on me. She's like, "You've been in the study room for about 4 days straight. I see you every day." And so I responded with, "I am going to do whatever it takes to get A's in my finals so I can get this portion of my life all in line, so I'm successful academically, so I could succeed in other aspects such as pageantry for nationals."
How do you feel it went? So you've had your finals. Do you feel good about them?
I'm feeling good. I had a Persian final, a math and politics final, an international politics final, and then I also had a verbal component to my Persian final, so I consider it 2 exams.
When it comes to politics, international politics, what are you studying? Is it things like diplomacy?
Mhm. In terms of international affairs, we try to focus on a specific region. So I'm focusing specifically on the Middle East, and others
Right.
will have a component such as security policy or diplomacy, for example, as you mentioned. But I'm specifically just focusing on a region, so I don't have to pick a specific aspect such as security or diplomacy.
Well, you picked a really, I'm going to say, interesting slash difficult area to study in terms of politics. I mean, the Middle East has there's always something going on in the Middle East, normally not so good. So you've finished finals
Yes.
and you have a small thing called Teen Miss Earth coming up
Well, just a
in
small little thing. No biggie.
wh- wh- when are you leaving? Because it seems most people are leaving on New Year's Eve, which also means, of course, they're not going to have any sort of New Year celebration, really. When are you leaving for Miss Earth?
I'm actually leaving the next day on the 1st in the morning. So that's my plan.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. This is my first national pageant. I've competed in a state pageant, of course, for Teen Miss New York Earth, but also once before that, which was my first ever pageant experience. So I definitely would say it requires a lot of soul searching and realizing
Mhm.
what I want to bring to the table and how I want to present myself as a candidate. And I'm proud of myself for, continuing to push through no matter, how many obstacles I faced, and how difficult sometimes the process can be to prepare for a national pageant. Because a lot of times, as someone who is somewhat new to pageantry, I was unaware of what it takes to be at that level.
So what sort of journey have you put yourself through in order to prepare? So obviously you're studying, and you want to do super, super well, which means you take the study seriously, as you should. And you got to balance that obviously with some sort of, personal life, some sort of downtime, and then you got this huge pageant coming up. So what has your preparation looked like?
The first thing I did was select what I wanted my platform or my goal to be as a title holder. I decided to combine my interests of policy making or implementing policy and environmental policy. So I did that through my One Planet Project page, in which I spread awareness of what environmental policy looks like, not in the complicated ways that politicians like to paint it out to be, but in ways that are accessible to real people, and showing how us as individuals can make an impact through our vote and our voice if you're under 18. Additionally, I decided what I wanted my Think Global, Act Local project to be, which is a major component of the Miss Earth competition where you make an actual impact in your local community. And through it, I was able to host a volunteer project, which benefited over 400 people who were struggling with food insecurity. But also on the Earth component, we recycled lots of cardboard boxes and implemented policy, or not policy, a plan for my local food bank to use when recycling in the future.
Let's go through both of those. So, sort of informing people about policy and then the food bank, because they're two separate things. I want to dive into both. When it comes to policy, so what do you do? So, you're looking for policies, whether they're good for the environment or not. And then is it that I think somewhere you mentioned, is it flow charts or flip charts? I can't quite remember, but you take them and you try to simplify them. I mean, look, because I don't know exactly what the policies are in America, but here in Australia, you can wade through hundreds of pages and still have no idea what it's about, right? It's almost like the longer it is, the less it actually accomplishes. So, do you go through the policy and then try to simplify it into understandable terms? Is that what you do?
Absolutely. My generation is one of change making. I think that's a lot of times what
Mm.
Gen Z is defined as. And
Yep.
a lot of times we look to digestible ways of absorbing all this information because as a social media generation, we're constantly taking in knowledge from around the world, which is something that a lot of generations before us can't say they experienced. And I accomplished my goal of implementing or encouraging teens to learn about environmental policy through infographics. I'm sure you've seen them before
Mm.
during major
Yep.
protests or major issues. People make these little infographics on Instagram where you could slide and learn about an issue in a few words. And that
Yep.
was my goal through my page.
And how did you get interested in that side of things? So, politics and policy making. I mean, I I wouldn't say it's not fun because fun, the definition of fun for everyone is different. But I think most people your age probably aren't so interested in politics. They're more interested in fashion halls and things like that. Things which are a bit, let's say, simpler to understand, don't quite require the same amount of brain work and legwork. Obviously, assimilating an entire policy and trying to simplify it is no small amount of work. So, how did you get interested in that area to begin with?
A lot of times, in my opinion, politics intersects, sorry, with implementing change. And as I mentioned, my generation is a change-making generation. I grew up with the idea that I'm seeing injustice each day on my phone. I can't just
Mhm.
sit back and watch it happen. I need to make some sort of difference, even if I have little power or agency to do that. And I found that through social media, a lot of the times, I'm able to make a difference, whether it was also previously, I made infographics for my local food bank. So we educated teens in very much accessible ways on how they themselves can make a difference in fighting food insecurity, whether it's volunteering or making a $5 or $10 donation. All of these little actions matter. So that was one reason I got into politics, in order to really implement change. Another, I would say, is representation as well. I'm one of few Middle Eastern candidates for not Miss Earth, but in general pageantry. So I believe that I do provide a different perspective and a different set of values because of my background. The third reason is I've been involved in politics for a long time. I volunteered for my local congressman, Frank Pallone, and I also am part of my university's pre-law fraternity, which has given me the opportunity to experience politics, but also learn that my passions lie in the implementation rather than the creation of policy. And that's why I'm interested in being a lawyer one day.
Okay, so there's a lot to dig into there,
Sorry,
Nicole.
I had a lot to
Um,
say on that.
no, that's a good thing. And the thing that I've noticed with American politics, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, please, but the way, because you speak specifically about implementation, and to me, that seems like the part where a lot of policies that a lot of people want. So when I say a lot of people, more than half of Americans actually want to implement, but the policies never get implemented for one reason or another. And I know there's sort of this long-standing joke about Senate, and it's filled with old white men. I don't know if that's completely accurate, but I know your generation is the generation of change, but I also know a lot of them feel like, well, there's just nothing that they can do, because even if they vote for the right person, whatever, a lot of the stuff that people promise never gets done, politicians in particular. So, in terms of young people getting involved and actually being able to create the change that they want, what have you noticed? What has been your experience? Do you have any tips for young people such as yourself to go, well, actually, it's not hopeless. Here's how you can actually make a real difference, help getting these things implemented?
Absolutely. It's so easy to feel powerless in today's society
Mhm.
because a lot of times these big changes are happening around us, whether it's climate change, as the Miss Earth System Love talks about, and talks about how important it is to stand up against climate change and all these other major issues that are going on in the world. It can feel like us as individuals, especially as a teen, it can feel as though you have
Yeah.
no power.
Yep.
What I've learned throughout my life, my long 18 years, is how important your voice can be in making a difference. I've always been one to stand up for issues I care about and using my voice to speak, even when sometimes I was encouraged not to. For example, my
Mhm.
first ever pageant platform, well, I wanted it to be, was for teens to help support refugee families, especially refugee children as they immigrate specifically to the United States, and help them acclimate to the climate, because that's something I did throughout my years in high school, was tutor a local refugee student. However, it was often deemed as too political or supporting one side or
Yep.
the other. To me, that's a bipartisan issue, supporting those in need. That's just something that's really important to
I
me.
agree.
And sometimes using your voice to speak up on these issues that you care about, even if sometimes it may seem difficult or as though people wouldn't approve of these ideas, it's important to realize the power of your voice to make a difference, whether it's on social media or in interviews like these.
Do you think it's possible, particularly in your country where it is, you have the two parties, and it almost seems, I can't remember who I was talking to, but just because sometimes it seems so divisive that all you have to say is that you're Democrat or you're Republican, and then immediately 50% of the population just blanket hates you. I mean, you talk about bipartisanship, but it just almost seems like sometimes it doesn't matter whether you have a good idea or not. If you're not in the same party that I vote for, then what you're talking is complete nonsense. Do you feel that there is actually room still for intelligent civil conversation and debate? Because to me it's like, well, if you don't come together on some topics, not all of them, obviously the parties differ on certain issues, but what you said, for example, refugees just basically being good human beings should be hopefully bipartisan.
Mhm.
Have you felt that there is still room for that sort of debate and conversation and coming together, or is it as divisive as it sometimes seems to be in the media?
Absolutely. Civil political discourse is so hard to find in today's society. Watch presidential debates between two
Mhm.
candidates. Oftentimes, it's more personal attacks rather than talking
Yep.
about political issues, which is so disheartening. And I would say a counterexample to a lot of times the political divisiveness we have going on in our nation is candidate Kara Mund. Kara Mund is a former Miss America, and she ran as a third party candidate in North Carolina. For those who are unaware of American politics, third party candidates usually are very unlikely to succeed just because of the system we have set up right now. And despite having all these disadvantages thrown at her, she was able to capture 37% of the vote against an incumbent, which is someone who's
Wow.
already held the position.
Yeah.
That really demonstrates one thing, that pageantry helps to teach the skills you need as a politician, especially as a female politician in the United States.
Mhm.
Second of all, it shows that bipartisanship is possible with the right candidate, like Kara Mund, for example.
Just help me out here. So when you say third party, does that mean not Democrat and not Republic? Is that what it is?
Yep.
Right. Okay. So in Australian politics, we have actually, interestingly, a very similar phenomenon right now. We call them
Really?
independents. So
Okay.
they're independent affiliations. And they have been sweeping in my state of New South Wales, which is where Sydney is. They were a huge powerhouse at the last elections. Not previously so much because we don't really have a two-party. We do. We have sort of Labor, and then on the other side, there's Liberal. So it's the
Mhm.
left-leaning and right-leaning. But at the last election, a lot of people voted for these. We call them teals because there's blue, there's red, and the teal's kind of purple in the middle.
I like that.
Um, and they did really, really well. So now this is interesting because it's happening here in Australia, which is similar culturally to the United States.
For sure.
And obviously, there's cases of it happening now in America. What do you think is a cause of that? Why do you think more people are looking for some sort of third party or some sort of independent person right now?
Mhm. Absolutely. I would say that because we are so polarized right now, because of issues such as echo bubbles, we go on social media, we only see things we agree with. Or a lot of
Mhm.
times, our communities represent the ideas or the values that we hold. And we oftentimes don't hear things outside of what we agree with. However, these third party candidates are demonstrating that a lot of times you don't need to succumb to one specific opinion that doesn't really fully reflect you. A lot of
Mhm.
times I can say I agree, to some extent on this issue, but I have a different twist on it. A third party candidate has the freedom and not the restraints of their specific
Yeah.
party to demonstrate how they may really feel on issues, which is something that, these specific parties may not have the freedom to do.
Yeah, we have I don't know, again, it's the same in the American political system, but we have what's called crossing the room.
Mm.
So you have one party on one side of the room physically and the other party on the other side. And normally you're expected, if you belong to those parties, to vote the party line. But every
Yes.
now and then they will have votes where they allow people, sometimes called a conscience vote, and people can vote based on their own individual opinions. But I want to ask a more general question on the theme of politics, and then obviously politics crossing over into pageantry. As you already identified, traditionally we're not supposed to talk about politics
Mhm.
in pageantry, and additionally, we're really not supposed to discuss controversial issues. Now, I don't like that because I feel, as you said, your generation is a generation of change. But more generally than that, we look to pageantry, the women in pageantry, to be the next generation of leaders,
Yep.
right? Not everyone will agree with me on that, but that's how I see it. Through pageantry, you're developing the skills to become a leader, as you've pointed out with your example. And to me, you can't be a leader if you're unwilling to speak about an informed opinion on these very controversial issues, because that's where we need leadership.
Yep.
It's not, you can't really be a leader if you're saying something really simple. Everyone goes, yeah, that's common sense. But where we need leadership is on the really controversial issues. So tell me, how do you feel in terms of, obviously you are in politics, you're interested in politics, and you have very formed and informed opinions. Do you feel that we should be starting to address more of these really critical issues, even environmental issues, in pageantry?
Mhm. I have a few thoughts on this idea. One is, as a title holder, especially a national title holder, you're not just representing one group of people. I'm not just representing New York anymore if I'm crowned Teen Miss Earth USA. I'm representing the entire country, and that
Mm,
includes a wide array of political opinions. So I do believe it's important not to take specific political stances. For example, I'm leaning left or I'm leaning right, because
mhm.
that will create this division that we just discussed and will not allow me to be an effective title holder and use my voice to bring everyone together. At the same time, on issues of human rights or climate change, which I believe are bipartisan issues, I believe it's important to use your voice to stand up on these issues, because as a title holder, you need to use your influence to positively benefit the community that you're targeting.
That's well said. And if you do take on the national title, then you do indeed represent all the other teams competing. Let me ask you this. So obviously, you're studying you're very passionate about what you're studying, and it's a very deep field, and it's going to be, it's changing field, especially in this day and age where a lot of things are uncertain. Where do you see yourself going with it career wise? Like, where would you like to see yourself in 10 years' time? Let's say when you're late 20s or early 30s.
A very distant dream, I guess, would be to be a diplomat. It's definitely something very difficult to achieve. And I often say I've been a diplomat my whole life because my parents have two different political views. So I've been training for this moment a long time. It's always a joke I have, but that is one dream I have. Another way I could use this degree is also as a lawyer, which right now I'm on the pre-law track. So I hope to achieve my law degree. But even if I do, I could always achieve being a diplomat or take a international humanitarian
Mhm.
standpoint or career later from a law degree. So that's what I'm pursuing right now.
And you say your parents have differing political viewpoints. So does that mean that the conversation in your household has politics comes up quite often?
To some extent, I believe it's really important, just especially as a title holder, to be aware of everything that's going on around us because, like I said, you're representing everyone, and that means representing people who have experienced the same thing as you, or people who have no idea what it's like to walk in my
Mm.
shoes. So, I believe that having knowledge of all these different perspectives and opinions is so incredibly important because that means I can discuss with anyone and be able to relate to them in a way that I think is lacking a lot in not only politicians, but in everyday society. Sometimes we won't even interact with those who are different than us or don't agree with us. But I believe a skill set I hold that is really beneficial right now is being able to communicate with anyone, even if they have a different opinion than me, and try to understand them at a level playing field.
Do you think that people aren't, when it comes to people who disagree with us, I think one of the things that you really need in any free country, any country that has free speech, one of the skills is that we need to be able to actually have civil conversations with everyone, even if we disagree on certain issues.
Yes.
Now, I don't know about you. My opinion is that again, the discussion is sorely lacking because we seem to be very tribal. And if you don't agree with me, then instantly I label you as a bad person. It's not even that I debate your point. It's what they call you could tell me ad hominem attacks, where I attack your character rather than actually discussing your viewpoint. Um, but you have, as you have identified, you have that skill set to actually converse with everyone. Now, how do you do that? Do you think that's something that you do because you're willing to do it? Or do you think that literally there are some skills that you need to have in order to be able to have conversations, open and civil conversations with everyone, even if we disagree on certain issues?
As I mentioned previously, a lot of times we only are exposed to our own viewpoints. So
Mm,
when we see something that doesn't resemble our own ideas, our immediate instinct is to attack because somehow it goes against our moral character or our identity to some extent because of the role that these ideas are playing in politics right now. But I don't believe it takes a certain skill set. It takes a certain mindset. The mindset
Yeah.
that we are all people who in the United States are hoping to promote democracy, for example. That is a
Mm.
common goal that links us all together, or promoting rights for all, or promoting, civility for everyone. A common goal links us all, especially I'm speaking specifically in the United States. So having this mindset that we are all working towards a common goal, and just because we have different means of achieving that goal, that doesn't mean that we can't work together. That is the way that I've tried to view the political realm right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. I think it's much more mindset than a skill set. So then my next question has to be, where do you think you got that mindset from? Do you think it was from your upbringing? Was there a certain teacher you had? Was it from your study?
I mentioned this actually in my interview. I was a really shy kid. I would never be able to speak the way I do now, and being able to speak to an interviewer like yourself would take a lot out of me. But now I feel very comfortable using my voice because of a teacher I had in 7th grade. I'll shout her out. Thank you, Mrs. Simon. She placed me in speaking competitions, and through that
Oh,
experience, I learned how to present poetry, how to debate, how to defend my viewpoint. All these different experiences shaped me into the person I am today. And I'm so grateful for her because she's honestly been one of the biggest impacts on my life and formed me into the person I am today.
what was it like being a super shy young girl being thrust into a speaking competition?
It sounds like a bad TV show. Like the girl can't speak and now she has to speak to a crowd. But it definitely was very intimidating. I was always very much into my schoolwork, just focusing on that rather than, being a big speaker. But having that experience completely changed my mindset because that helped me discover the idea that I was sharing previously, that your voice is your power, because using your voice can help implement changes that you care about. So through that experience, my life honestly took a big drastic change.
That's amazing. I always like hearing stories of how one person, particularly when it's a teacher, because teachers often are underappreciated. Hearing how one teacher can actually change the course of someone's life for the better. So now that you love speaking, is it fair to say that interview, when it comes to the pageant, is interview now your favorite part? So to clarify, you guys leading up have already had the interviews. They were held remotely, so you won't have the actual interview at the pageant itself. But is interview your favorite part, or is it the chance to wear some amazing stylish gowns and strut your stuff on stage? Like, which part is the favorite for Nicole right now?
I would say interview is my favorite portion because I really get to highlight everything I'm working towards, my goals, my aspirations, what I've accomplished thus far. But it can also be very difficult because I think there's so many aspects of every person, but especially thinking about myself, I'm very much a multifaceted person. My interests don't just lie in like one specific bubble.
Mm.
So highlighting that within a 5-minute conversation can be kind of difficult,
Mhm.
just a little bit. And that's where having that background in public speaking competitions has really helped.
It would have been nice if they let you take some infographics in. You could have summarized some of your points with like
Oh,
well,
yeah.
I don't need to talk for 5 minutes. Just look at this pie chart or this graph here, and you'll understand it.
This is the
Unfortunately,
goal. You could swipe for page 2, interest, 3 goals.
exactly. Exactly. Maybe one day we'll get there. Look, I mean, the whole virtual interview thing is a sort of side effect of COVID.
Mhm.
So maybe we'll go more in that direction. I think it could be a good thing because, for what I've heard, you guys have had a bit of a longer interview. You've been
Yes.
able to have slightly longer interviews than some other systems because it's been virtual and because it's been held before the pageant. And I think that's a good thing because I think they really need to get to know their potential title holders, and 2 minutes is, I mean, 5 minutes is not long, as you said. 2 minutes is like you say your name and you're out of there already. But I want to circle back to the food bank work that you've done. So tell the audience more about that and perhaps how you got into it and why you felt it was important.
Awesome. So I began working with my local food bank in my freshman year of high school. We went as a volunteer trip, and from there, I found the act so rewarding, being able to physically move boxes or physically unpack food or physically hand food to someone shows that my work is making a tangible difference rather than
Mm.
social media. Sometimes you don't know the impact of your work till much later,
Yeah.
but this is
Yeah.
like, you're actually physically doing the act. So after that, I became part of their teen leadership council, actually as a social media liaison, where I made infographics spreading awareness of food insecurity. I've been doing this for a while, the infographics.
And see.
And then after that, the next year took the role as president because I was elected, which was such an honor. I represented our council on a much broader scale. I was able to meet leaders of the food bank, and also we hosted events such as the Teen Hunger Forum, where we educated teens on the importance of volunteerism and the importance of fighting food insecurity.
How does it make you feel? I think it's interesting to ask someone so young as yourself to be volunteering at your age and to be doing something, as you said, very physical. So it's very tangible. You are moving boxes, lifting boxes, unpacking boxes. How does that make you feel? How did it actually make you feel the very first time you did that?
Lots of times we were speaking previously about feeling powerless against fighting against injustices in our world or major issues such as food insecurity, which can't be tackled one person at a time,
Mm.
to make the impact, of course, we hope to make, which is, of course, ending the entire issue. But being able to take those small steps, and especially being part of a council where us as team leaders work together to think of ways to fundraise, like we fundraised over $20,000 throughout my time as president. Um, Being able to take those steps to make a difference alongside my fellow teens really felt as though I was accomplishing my goal. I was actually reviewing your previous interview and your last 10 questions you do. For the
Mm.
last question, I got pretty philosophical thinking about it, about how growing up very religious, knowing that my mission, I just decided very young, some would say even from a higher power, would be
Yep.
to make a difference. And I feel as though I wouldn't be satisfied with my life unless I was helping others in some aspect. So being able to volunteer on behalf of my food bank
Mhm.
or any other action I do to help fight injustice really makes me feel as though I'm accomplishing that goal I was meant to do. And some people might say it's a little, like too religious or whatever, but to me, it's very personal. These actions I'm doing. It's not just for a resume. It's because I feel as though I'm doing something to help others beyond myself.
Yeah. No, I don't think it's too religious at all. I mean, whether you believe in a higher power or not, I mean, sometimes we get ideas or we find our life purpose in areas that we never would have thought. And it wasn't like a logical step by step. It just, you were born with it for some reason. I mean, we all have innate talents. But talking to you now, I want to ask you the same question that I asked Gracie Pfaff, because she's doing amazing philanthropic work, ending hunger. So you raised $20,000 for your food bank, which at
Mhm.
your age, at any age, would be incredible. So there's that. It seems that your purpose in life, even career-wise, is very heart driven. It's not to make billions of dollars. I mean, if you do, good on you, but it's to make an impact in a different way. And let's say I'll call it a higher way. And then I know from watching your intro video that you dance and that you were helping adults with disabilities through that. So there's obviously a spirit of giving in you beyond yourself, a philanthropic spirit. So I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Gracie. Where do you think that spirit came from? Because I don't think everyone's born with it. I think everyone is capable of volunteering, but there are some people for whom it's just in their DNA. Like they could never do something without giving back or without helping people who are less fortunate. Where do you think that spirit in you came from?
I will point to a few aspects. One, my mother is incredible. She is the chairwoman for the Institute for Disabilities I volunteered at, and she's been part of this board for many, many years, dedicating her time and her resources towards this organization because she believes in it and she believes in making a difference. So this attitude of constantly giving back stems from her. Second, I will also point to growing up in Catholic school. There was always this idea that we were so blessed to have the opportunities we do. What are you going to do with it? What steps are you going to do become the best version of yourself? And how will being that version of yourself benefit others? because a lot of the ideas I learned were about selflessness. And a lot of
Mm.
times people can say that contradicts with pageantry. But in order to give back to others, you need to be the best version of yourself, because how can you do that effectively without being reflective and thinking introspectively?
Absolutely. I don't see it so much as a contradiction. I think it's more of a balance.
Mhm.
And I think the queens that make the most impact are the ones who go above and beyond and are very, very selfless. Now, I want to ask you, so outside, because you sound incredibly busy and you sound like
I'm
you
lucky
have,
busy.
okay, so you have a lot of things going on and I think they're deeply impactful. So do you ever have a chance to just, when you just want to de-stress or do nothing, if there's a time, maybe you don't do that, I don't know, but if you just need to take a step back and be, let's say, a more typical, I don't want to say a normal, but a more typical teenager, what do you do just to relax?
I would say some aspects that make me a typical teenager. I was a cheerleader for a long time, and I did dance, which I guess is more of a typical teen thing. But to actually just relax, mm, I love watching documentaries. And I love watching YouTube channels that analyze business plans, which sounds so nerdy, but that was always my favorite YouTube channel. It was called Company Man. And now I have all these fun facts, which brings me so much joy telling people these little tidbits. Like, did you know that Walmart did this? Like, it brings me so much joy. So to relax, I just like to watch something and not really think too much, just enjoy the content, let it consume me for a little bit, and then I can go back to thinking.
So it's kind of like Netflix, but not really. You're not you're not really binge watching the normal stuff. Well, I mean, this business
I
thing.
watched Wednesday. I loved it. So I watched some normal
Oh, okay.
Netflix shows too.
I have not watched that. Every meme and every post at the moment seems to be about Wednesday at the moment.
I love it. Just
Um,
watch it.
it must be worth watching. I mean, even me, I've been learning to play, well, relearning to play the violin, and I was
Oh,
on YouTube, and apparently Wednesday played the cello in
yes.
one of the episodes. I think she played Painted Black, and that popped up on my YouTube. But just with what you watch on YouTube in terms of business, what are some of the weird and wacky things that you've learned watching that? Because I love entrepreneurship, and I find business stories very interesting, similar to yourself. What are some of the weird success stories or things like that that you've picked up?
Hmm. Trying to think specifically. Well, I was recently also listening to this podcast. It's called The Journal. It's really great, but I was learning a lot about this specific business that was called Movie Pass, and they were discussing how they were giving its members the opportunity to attend as many movies as they'd like within a month for only $10 a month. And its founder believed in its ideas so much that he continued investing in the company or having using its resources, even though he knew that eventually it would fail. But he just had this hope in this idea that eventually would all work out. And though he
Right.
wasn't successful, he wrote a whole book about how he would rather, I guess, die trying would be the phrase. He didn't want to give up on his idea that he had, which I thought was pretty inspirational, even though he wasn't ultimately successful financially.
Wow. That's interesting. Was that a recent example or was that a while ago?
Yeah, it was only in the past few years. And also, an interesting one is, did you know that the fake meat industry is dying down? People are not as interested anymore in buying um, false meat, which is not that great for the environment, but also not good for those businesses.
That's an interesting one. That one doesn't hugely surprise me because I used to be a vegan, and so obviously meat substitutes were a thing. But you'd look at the ingredients in the meat substitute, and frankly, you'd just taste the meat substitute, and you would be very much like, I'd be better off just eating the real thing or just not trying these substitutes. So yeah, that doesn't surprise me, but that's probably the way that should go. People vote with their wallets. Now, coming up to the pageant, we've discussed a lot of in-depth issues. When it comes to the pageant itself, do you have, if you were lucky enough to have the fortunate enough to have the crown placed on your head in 2 weeks' time? Geez, it's coming up in roughly 2 weeks' time. What are some of the plans that you have with it, or what are some of the things you'd like to do with the title of Teen Miss Earth USA?
In cahoots with the platform I was speaking about previously, the One Planet Project, I hope to bring back all my amazing teen title holders for a virtual letter writing campaign. So all of my fellow contestants can write to their local legislators and urge them to support pro-Earth policy. This will give even teen title holders who don't have the opportunity to vote yet the opportunity to use their voice to make a greater difference and urge their legislators to support environmental policy. Additionally, I also hope to go out to various schools and speak on this platform that I've established thus far, because I've done that thus far as a state title holder, and I believe it's been very beneficial being able to make a personal connection with either children my age or younger, and first, emphasize the power of their voice, as I previously mentioned, and two, how environmental policy can be affected by their actions, whether it's voting when they're 18 or, like I said, using your voice.
Absolutely. That sounds like it'd be a very worthwhile endeavor. I imagine, because you seem like a very organized individual, that most of the prep is already done and handled. You have everything sorted out. So in between now and New Year's, when you leave, will you be sort of just taking it easy and recovering from finals, or is it still going to be go, go, go over the festive period?
Definitely go, 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 because I don't like to slow down, especially before like a bigger competition such as nationals. Right now, I am packing. I am checking my list twice to make sure everything is ready to go. I am working with my coach for some last minute walking lessons to make sure my walk is ready to go and stage ready, as well as just mental preparation, knowing that I've tried my best thus far to succeed within the national competition. But lastly, supporting my fellow teens, because this can be very difficult for a lot of us, because we're putting ourselves out there on a national stage to ultimately be seen by a wide audience with various opinions on who we are. And that can be really difficult. You're really being judged by so many aspects of yourself that are deeply personal. But I believe that by supporting my fellow teens, we're going to get through this together and do our best to be the best, most impactful queens we can possibly be.
Amazing. And shout out to all the pageant fans. Please be kind. Pageant fans sometimes can say some pretty horrible things. So I mean, I can't remember where I saw, there was another pageant page, and they allow you to submit sort of anonymous like grievances or things like that. And someone was not too happy with pageant fans because they were saying some horrible things. But they also pointed out that most of the people who judge, and this is not just pageantry, this is in general, I think a lot of the people who make judgments have never actually been in your guys' shoes, right? And I think it takes a lot more courage to, as you say, put yourself out there than to just sit on a couch somewhere randomly and judge. But kindness never goes astray. Nicole, just before we get to the final 10, is there anyone that you would like to give a shout out to?
I would have to say my amazing mother. She is so kind, loving, and supporting of my journey. From the first time I asked her if I can compete in a pageant, she was actually finishing a surgery, so she was still, suffering the consequences of being a little bit under anesthesia. And she was so confused the next day when she said, "Nicole, you're competing in a pageant? What? You told me this when I was under anesthesia." But she's been supportive of me since that first discussion around pageantry, and she's always been there to make sure I do my best. Another shout out, of course, to my whole family, my dad, all my 13 cousins on my dad's side, my 2 cousins on my mom's side, all my aunts and uncles for supporting me on this journey. I love you all so much.
A lot of cousins, at least for me. I have 1 cousin. How many do you have? 13.
13 on my dad's and 2 on my mom's.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you ever have like extended family gatherings?
Let me tell you, I have a really big family, specifically on my dad's side. Our family events, such as Thanksgiving, can go up to 80 people because, people bring their friends, they bring their, our second cousins, our third cousins, our fourth cousins. We are a really close family, and that's something that's really important to me. And also, we were talking about things that shape my perspective. Having a lot of younger cousins teaches you how to be responsible, teaches you how to
Right.
take
Yeah.
care of others. It's like sometimes being a full-time babysitter, but I love them so much, so it's worth it.
You do sound like the responsible one. You do seem like the one at these family gatherings. You'd be making sure that the 5-year-old doesn't stick his finger in a PowerPoint or something like that. So, do you do? I mean, you sound super busy. I imagine you don't have time to do babysitting, though.
No, I was a babysitter for a good portion of high school.
Right. Okay. That doesn't surprise me. All right. Let's get to these final 10. So, number one, what is your favorite word?
When I was thinking of this answer, I thought of the media I'm consuming now, and of course, everyone's on TikTok. There is this idea of divine femininity, which is the word I picked. Well, it's technically two. Sorry, a little bit of a
Yeah.
cheating. And this relates a lot to pageantry. Actually, here in my university, I wrote a research paper specifically on pageantry and how its purpose has evolved throughout the past 100 years. Previously, pageantry was a way to appeal to male standards of beauty. However, today, pageantry oftentimes is owned by women for women.
Mm,
And femininity is not only allowed, but encouraged. We are allowed to pursue our goals, our dreams, our aspirations, etc., through the system of uplifting women. And another reason I picked that as well was because a lot of times in politics, as someone who's studying politics specifically, women in positions of power can't really express those same feminine traits as you can in a pageant. Because, for example, Hillary Clinton's power suit
mm,
popularized the idea that in order for a woman to be successful, they can't have feminine traits. So you can't wear a dress. You have to wear a power suit, which is, of course, incredible if you feel powerful in a suit. But if you feel
yeah.
powerful in a dress, that option isn't really available to you. So that's why I picked divine femininity.
Perfect. That research paper that you published, is that publicly available?
I can make it available to you if you'd like.
I would love to read that
Oh,
because I personally think that pageantry is evolving, but it needs to continue evolving. So I'd love to see what you came up with because obviously your research would have been fairly in depth. So I'd love to see that and compare notes because I have my own thoughts on that as well. But number two, what is your least favorite word?
I said my least favorite word is being. I also cheated again. I'm sorry. I said you're
Two
too
words?
much.
Three words.
Three words. Three words. It's, I guess, technically one phrase. But I think a lot of times, either as women or just in general, people are described to be too much. You're too loud. You're too confident. You're too much of this, too much of that. But a lot of times we need to be unapologetically our own selves. And I know you talked previously in an interview about what it means to be yourself. I mean, being yourself socially with your friends or your family.
Yeah.
You're never too much by just sharing who you are. So never let someone take you down for being your full unapologetic self.
I don't think that's a phrase that I've ever used to anyone, male or female. I think you really should embrace every aspect of yourself and be yourself. I only have an issue with it when it's, well, I mean, you watched the interviews, so I think I've made my thoughts pretty clear, but there certainly is wisdom in being yourself as opposed to thinking that you can't be yourself because it's certainly too much for someone else. Number three in life, what gets you excited? What turns you on?
I said learning new things. I love having the opportunity to learn about different cultures or different identities. For example, I thought of recently in my university, they had a presentation on the Uyghurs, which is a minority group in China. And I was able to speak of a member from the organization that was representing that group. And I actually learned that the language I'm learning or studying right now, Persian, has the same alphabet and script as the Uyghur language. I would have never learned that if I wasn't being curious and trying to learn new things. So that gets me really excited. Like I mentioned, I love watching YouTube videos that are educational. It just gets me really excited to learn new things.
Number four, what turns you off?
What I said was negativity. And I pointed to my cousin Layla. Layla, if you're watching this either later or now, I learned from her that being positive is the best thing you could do in order to succeed. Negativity will only ruin your self-image and not allow you to get to the places you want to be to succeed. And a lot of times, specifically in my university, it's easy to be amongst those who are, you know, I can't do this, I can't complete these finals, I won't have this opportunity. But I think a lot of times surrounding yourself with amazing, positive people rather than negative people who say,
Mm.
apply to that job, apply for the internship, don't give up. I love being around those people who combat the negativity that can be oh so prevalent in a university or any community.
Well, I think there's enough negativity out there in social media that we certainly don't need more of it. If you want negativity, it's not in short supply. Let's put it that way. Number 5, what sound or noise do you love?
This is very personal. The beach and beach waves is a sound I love so much. My mom's mom, my grandma, she was living in Florida before she passed, and the ways we would bond would be through going to the beach together and listening to the ocean and reflecting. But even my other grandmother, my dad's mom, she always said that swimming out into the Gulf or wherever you wanted to swim out farther made her feel closer to God and made her feel more connected to the earth in general. And I found that to be really beautiful and made me love the beach and all of its sounds.
That is something that I would certainly love to do, swim out into the Gulf, because it sounds amazing, and I know salt water and sun is very healthy for you, but I'm phobic of what might be in the water. I don't swim very well either, so I just have images of Jaws and things like that.
Oh, you watch Jaws? No, don't do it. It's going to scare you.
I'm not, well, yeah, obviously I'm scared of sharks, but I'm not in a healthy way. Have you ever seen the old, it's an old movie, Beaches? It stars Bette Midler.
I don't think so, no.
No, it's just when you mention beaches and you mention your grandmother's, that's a movie you might want to watch. And if you don't cry at the end, I will be very, very surprised. But
I'll let you know.
it's a very wholesome movie. It's called Beaches by Bette Midler. Number 6, what sound or noise do you hate?
I would say crying because, as I mentioned before, I used to babysit my cousins or babysit local families, and kids crying always broke my heart because I felt so powerless at the time. Like, what can I do to comfort them? And it's really sad overall. It just makes you immediately want to comfort them. But sometimes, when you're trying to be a babysitter, you have to be like, no, don't cry. You have to be strong. But then I just immediately want to give them a hug and, be like,
Yeah,
it's okay.
yeah. Number 7, if you could have any one superpower, what would you pick and why?
I would say time manipulation, as in if you ever watched Harry Potter, the
Mhm.
the watch he has go back and forth. Because I've been doing a lot of research lately on the climate clock. Do you know the climate clock where they talk about how long it's going to take until man-made disaster leads to like Earth major Earth issues that are irreversible.
Yeah.
And within that research, I was thinking specifically on the Earth, we can go back and redo some of these problems that caused the climate standing we are now. But at the same time, as evident in Harry Potter or The Flash or any show about time manipulation, if you're not careful, everything can be further damaged. So
Yeah.
I would be really strategic about it, make a good plan, a little checklist maybe, and see if it works out.
How many time travel things you've seen, but haven't you noticed that almost always it ends poorly for the person who thinks they can control time? It almost always ends very badly. I mean, The Flash is a really good, I don't know if you're talking about a movie or the TV series, but certainly in the TV series,
Yes, I've
it
heard of
is,
the show.
yeah, don't mess with time, basically seems to be the moral of the story.
No, it's okay
Um,
because we're gonna plan it. It's gonna be good. Trust.
I'm fairly certain they tried to plan it as well. And like they're supposed to be smart and they still ended up, it's what they say, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Anyway, number 8, what job would you most like to attempt?
I mentioned previously ideas of being a lawyer or a diplomat, but something different I've always thought of being one day would be a teacher. just because of, I mentioned before, all the amazing teachers I've had who've impacted my life so positively. And I love being around children. When I was going to schools as Teen Miss New York and visiting them, I saw how my words actually resonated with them. And some of the parents actually sent me pictures. I brought them reusable tote bags so they could use them at home instead of using plastic bags. Because in New Jersey, actually, they're banned, and I was visiting a school in New Jersey. So they were able to use it for grocery shopping or for just playing around. And it was so heartwarming to see that something I said made an impact on kids who are going to grow up and be change makers themselves.
Mm. And question 9, what job would you definitely not like to attempt?
I would say a pilot. I'm a little scared of heights, number one. Just a little. And also you have little control over your schedule. I was reading a book about how this pilot was constantly being called to fly, and it was really affecting his personal life, and that's not so great. So for those reasons, no piloting for me.
How would you feel about doing a skydive, Nicole?
I will tell
Okay.
you, my first week at college, everyone's like, guys, we're 18 now. We have to go skydiving. And I was like, no way. Like, I value my life, but you guys got it. Good for you.
Okay. So time travel is a yes, but skydiving is a no.
Nope. That's too much.
Well, look, if you can control time, then if something goes wrong, God forbid, in skydiving, you can just turn back time, right?
Exactly. See, it all works out. Isn't that crazy?
Okay, final question. You know what's coming up, but let's have it. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
I'm going to be a little bit deep with this one. As I mentioned before, my goal in life has always been to serve others, make a difference, actually help others in a way that's tangible. And I believe that if, one day I went to heaven and God said, I've accomplished this goal, or you've made a difference in the way that I've planned for you, I would be incredibly grateful. And I felt as though I've done what I've always set out to do, or what was always planned for me to do, if you believe in a higher power. So that is what I would hope to hear.
Perfect. Well, Nicole, it's been a pleasure getting to speak to you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And best of luck I keep looking at the clock, at the calendar down there. I mean, it's the 21st of December here. So in 10 days time, best of luck. Not that you need it. I'll keep you on the line for just a second whilst I hang up with the audience. So thanks everyone for watching, whether it's live or on the replay, and we will speak to you next time. Bye for now. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Sorority Access is now open. So if you'd like to join an amazing group of women and learn how to be the most powerful, confident, and impactful queen possible, head to thepageantsorority.com. I'll see you there and see you in the next video.